Welcome back to Disturbed Reality. The US-led war on terror launched in the aftermath of the September 11th, 2001 attacks, not only reshaped global geopolitics and domestic security policies, but also played a significant and often overlooked role in popularizing gore content on the internet. This period marked a convergence of military conflict, emerging digital technologies, and evolving media appetites that normalized the circulation of graphic violence online, reshaping how war and death were perceived by the public. In the early 2000s, the internet was transitioning from a niche communication platform into a global medium. Coinciding with the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, this digital evolution allowed for unprecedented real-time sharing of information and imagery. Soldiers with handheld cameras, insurgent groups with camcorders, and latter, smartphones and social media turned combat zones into sources of raw, unfiltered footage. Websites such as BestGore, LiveLeak and Ogrish.com emerged as repositories for videos deemed too graphic for mainstream media, including beheadings, ambushes, bombings, as well as other executions. These platforms often hosted videos released by insurgent groups, notably Al-Qaeda and later ISIS, who used graphic content as psychological warfare and propaganda. The mass circulation of violent imagery served dual purposes. For militants, it was a strategic weapons. For consumers, it was both morbid curiosity and desensitized entertainment. American audiences, numbed by years of sanitized news broadcasts and politically managed war narratives, increasingly turned to alternative sites for the real war in all its blood-soaked reality. The war on terror, therefore, did not just produce violence but commodified it. The spectacle of war became clickbait, and the internet made gore more accessible at a scale never before imaginable. Mainstream media's reluctance to broadcast graphic images and videos created a vacuum filled by fringe platforms and forums. These unregulated spaces provided not only content but communities centered around viewing, sharing, and even critiquing violent footage. As US military censorship tried to sanitize its own public image, limiting access to both photos of dead soldiers or civilians, alternative narratives filled the gap. The war on terror paradoxically encouraged a proliferation of what it sought to suppress, the democratization of war's most brutal consequences. This normalization of gore had enduring cultural consequences. It helped foster the development of internet subcultures that glorify violence, desensitize audiences, and blur the lines between journalism, propaganda, and voyeurism. From the grainy beheading videos of the early 2000s to the polished execution videos of ISIS in the 2010s, the US-led war on terror catalyzed a shift in the aesthetics of violence. The framing of these images, their viral spread, and their consumption became an integral part of 21st century digital warfare. Without a doubt, the war on terror introduced the topic of gore and recorded executions to the public consciousness, and growing up seeing the Iraq War, as well as the war in Afghanistan happen in real time, I myself fully remember the various cases of hostages being taken in Iraq, which were mainstream news at the time. Often such stories were covered extensively on mainstream news channels, showcasing captives at the mercy of their kidnappers, whilst demands were made, and statements were released through the captives. Notably, I recall the case of Kenneth Bigley, an engineer who was kidnapped in Iraq by the terror group Tawhid and Jihad. During Ken's ordeal, his story was reported extensively on morning and daytime television, with videos being released by his captors prior to his murder. There were talks of negotiations, pleas from his family, as well as the British government, though his execution was confirmed by news networks on the 8th of October 2004, and the video of his murder was uploaded by his killers to various Islamic terror sites, as well as at least one shock site. Following the execution and the news that it was recorded, the name Kenneth Bigley among search results trended during that month of 2004, highlighting the general public's sense of morbid curiosity. The US war on terror marked a critical juncture in the digital dissemination of violent content. By turning the internet into a theatre of war, it popularised a new genre of online media, real gore. In doing so, It not only changed how war was fought, but also how it was seen and consumed by millions. The legacy of this transformation continues to echo in today's digital culture, where the line between witnessing and spectacle remains disturbingly thin. The Iraq War and the wider War on Terror were wars that were ultimately fueled by propaganda, including talks of weapons of mass destruction, supposedly at the disposal of then Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein, but ultimately this propaganda would indeed prove to be false. The execution videos and the hostage cases that occurred during the War on Terror were also their own propaganda pieces. Obviously, from the perspective of Iraqi and Middle Eastern terror groups, they were effective in spreading fear among soldiers and foreigners living in Iraq and the surrounding region. However, they were also inadvertent propaganda pieces for Western forces. As the War on Terror dragged on, the public became fatigued, bearing in mind the Iraq War here in the UK was unpopular to begin with, but when these execution videos were released, they would often infuriate the public, often because the victims were not active soldiers, instead they were usually engineers or working in other non-combatant professions. These brutal murders often extended the goodwill of the public for the Western war efforts due to their callous and cowardly nature. However, the case that started it all was the infamous murder of Daniel Pearl during the infancy of the War on Terror. Daniel Pearl was an American journalist who worked for the Wall Street Journal. On the 23rd of January 2002, he was kidnapped by jihadist militants while he was on his way to what he had expected would be an interview with Pakistani Islamic scholar Mubarak Ali Jolani in Karachi. Daniel Pearl and his wife settled in Mumbai when he was made the Southeast Asia Bureau Chief of the Wall Street Journal. They travelled to Karachi, Pakistan, which he used as a base for reporting on the United States war on terrorism following the 9/11 attacks by Al-Qaeda terrorists in the United States. He arranged a meeting with Islamic scholar Mubarak Ali Jolani for the 23rd of January 2002 to discuss the shoe bomber Richard Reed, who allegedly trained at one of Jolani's camps in Pakistan. On his way to the arranged meeting, he was then kidnapped by militants. Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, a British-born terrorist and a member of the extremist group Harkat ul-Ansar and later Jaish-e-Mohammed, later admitted to planning and committing the kidnapping, but he denied being involved in Pearl's murder directly. The murder video of Pearl was released by Jaish-e-Mohammed under the pseudonym of the National Movement for Restoration of Pakistani Sovereignty, and Jaish member Amjad Faruqi was reportedly involved in the kidnapping and murder. After his capture, the militants claimed that Daniel Pearl was a spy for both the US and Israeli authorities. The militants would then list out several demands for Pearl's release, including the release of all Pakistani terror detainees, and the release of a halted US shipment of F-16 fighter jets to the Pakistani government. During Daniel's final hours, the kidnappers sent the following message to US authorities: "We give you one more day. If America will not meet our demands, we will kill Daniel. Then this cycle will continue, and no American journalist could enter Pakistan." Photos of Pearl handcuffed with a gun to his head and holding up a newspaper were attached. The group did not respond to any public pleas for release of the journalist by his editor and his wife Marianne. The US intelligence forces did try to track down the kidnappers, but to no avail. It was later revealed that Pearl was detained and later killed at an Al-Qaeda safe house in Karachi, owned by Pakistani businessman Saud Memon. Daniel Pearl's murder occurred on the 1st of February 2002, just over a week after his initial kidnap. Months later, on May the 16th, his severed head and decomposed body were found cut into 10 pieces and buried, along with an identifying jacket in a shallow grave in Gadap, about 30 miles north of Karachi. When the police found Pearl's remains, 3 months after his murder, Abdul Sattar Edhi, a Pakistani humanitarian, collected all of the body parts and took them to the morgue. He helped ensure that Pearl's remains were returned to the United States, where he was later buried in the Mount Sinai Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. 20 days after Pearl's murder, on the 21st of February 2002, a video was released titled "The Slaughter of a Spy Journalist and the Jew Daniel Pearl." The video shows parts of Pearl's demise, as well as a message from him, as well as other war footage. During the video, Daniel Pearl said, "My name is Daniel Pearl. I'm a Jewish American from Encino, California, USA. I come from, well, on my father's side, the family is Zionist. My father's Jewish and my mother's Jewish. I'm Jewish. My family follows Judaism. We've made numerous family visits to Israel." In the video, Daniel Pearl also criticised American foreign policy, though his family state this was under duress, describing him as a proud American and that he abhorred extremist ideologies. They also said that he gave signals that indicated that he did not agree with what he was saying, though they didn't state what these signals were. The video was released under the name of the National Movement for the Restoration of Pakistani Sovereignty, a pseudonym of Elijah Muhammad, and the video had the captors repeating their earlier demands for the release of all Muslim prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, repatriation of all Pakistani nationals detained by the US, the end of US presence in Pakistan, and the delivery of undelivered F-16 fighter planes paid for by Pakistan in the 1980s. It concluded by vowing similar attacks on Americans in Pakistan in the future. They warned that if their demands were not met, they would repeat such brutal acts again and again. Several arrests were made in relation to the murder of Daniel Pearl, and quite frankly, there is still much speculation in regards to who actually killed him. However, on the 10th of March 2007, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed claimed responsibility for personally killing Pearl by beheading. Sheikh Mohammed was an alleged Al-Qaeda operative who was reported to be third in command under Osama bin Laden, the apparent mastermind of the September 11th attacks. In a confession read during his tribunal hearing, Mohammed said, "I decapitated with my blessed right hand the head of the American Jew Daniel Pearl in the city of Karachi, Pakistan." This confession was taken from his interrogation at a CIA black site interrogation center back in 2002. On March 19, 2007, Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh's lawyers cited that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's confession as part of an appeal in defense of their client. They said that they had always admitted that their client played a role in Pearl's kidnap, and even that they knew he would likely be killed, but they argued that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was the actual murderer. Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, however, would later receive a death penalty for his crime, and is currently still being held in Pakistan and had been on death row for a number of years. Though he's now been moved out of death row, as he appealed the sentence, which is currently still with the Supreme Court of Pakistan, who have yet to decide his fate. According to an investigative report published in January of 2011 by Georgetown University, the FBI used vein matching technology, which until now I never knew existed, to determine that the perpetrator in the video of the killing of Pearl was most likely Sheikh Mohammed, identifying him for a bulging vein running across his hand that was visible in the video. Federal officials had been concerned that Mohammed's confession, obtained through waterboarding, would not hold up in court. They intended to use this forensic evidence to bolster their case that he had murdered Pearl. Sheikh Mohammed in 2024 pled guilty to a range of terror charges in an attempt to use his guilty plea to avoid the death penalty. However, the plea deal was rescinded by Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. He is currently being detained in the infamous Guantanamo Bay. But nevertheless, let's discuss the one that arguably started it all, the murder video of Daniel Pearl. In totality, the video that includes footage of Daniel Pearl's murder is exactly 3 minutes and 38 seconds in length. Originally, it was uploaded to a host of jihadist websites, as well as at least one shock site, believed to be Ogreish by those who killed him. In fact, I believe that the video is included in the Ogreish Volume 1 mixtape. As you play the video, it starts with a montage of war footage from the Middle East, and in the background you hear an introduction from Daniel Pearl. He introduces himself, mentions details of his family, both on his mother and father's side, as well as mentioning their allegiance to Israel. He even makes note of a street name in a town in Israel being named after one of his past relatives. He then goes on to criticize American foreign policy in the Middle East, as well as the efficacy of Guantanamo Bay, where at the time, and still now, terror suspects were and are being held. He makes note of his hard time in captivity, stating how difficult it is to be in captivity without any access to the outside world or ability to communicate with his family, and he compares his situation to those being held in Guantanamo Bay. The audio quality is poor, and at times it's hard to make out what Daniel Pearl is saying. Due to the situation, the worry and panic in his voice is apparent, and this makes his speech pattern sound all over the place. And combining that with the tinny sound of the audio, it does make it very hard to listen to and ascertain the details. Towards the end of Daniel Pearl's speech, he again reiterates the wrongs of US foreign policy in the Middle East, and encourages American citizens to reject such policies. Once the address from Daniel Pearl is over, you then get to see snippets of the execution. You see a segment where Daniel Pearl seems to be laying on a mattress, though it's hard to tell due to the quality of the footage, and you see someone slicing Pearl's throat, though you only see the killer's hands. In relation to the earlier detail about vein matching, which was used to suggest that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was the killer, I can't see any veins on the hands, though possibly there are better quality versions of this video. You also get a second angle of the beheading. Again, all you see is someone cutting into the front of Pearl's throat, near the area of the Adam's apple. His throat is completely sliced open, and blood is staining the mattress or blanket below him. You then get a couple of gruesome still images of Pearl laying on the mattress with his throat sliced open, and in these images you see that he is wearing the jacket that he was wearing in the infamous photo that shows a gun being held to his head. This was the image that the kidnappers sent to the US authorities. The clip then takes a jump cut, and the video at this point is edited to look like some kind of end credit sequence. There is a black background but with two circles, and one circle shows an image of prisoners being held in Guantanamo Bay, whereas the other circle shows a video of someone holding Daniel Pearl's decapitated head up to the camera in a theatrical manner. The camera then zooms into the face of Daniel Pearl's severed head, and this shot then turns into a still image. A final message then rolls, much like credits at the end of a movie. The message reiterates the killer's demands in relation to the release of prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, as well as a host of other demands. This also ends with a threat that events like this would reoccur if these demands were not met. That is the end of the video. Despite this case being one of the definitive stories of a war on terror, I hadn't actually seen this video until now. I went back and researched and read old internet forums of people discussing the clip, stating how bad it was, and that it even kept them up at night and remained on their minds for weeks. Having seen and read these comments, it made me realise how desensitized I and many people are surrounding such content, because compared to other later released murder and execution videos, whether they be from terror groups or drug cartels, the video itself is actually very tame. I was preparing myself for something much worse. Maybe that says a lot about me after researching such topics for the best part of 4 years. Even people who don't seek this type of content out, I dare say may consider this video to be tame, due to the sheer amount of shocking content that we see on social media on a daily basis, particularly in this day and age, with the various wars going on all around the world, from Gaza to Ukraine to Sudan, much of which is broadcast on social media, and with more and more people relying on such apps for their news, due to a lack of trust in mainstream media. One of the negative consequences has been that we largely as a whole have become desensitized to such imagery and video due to the uncensored manner of social media. While I feel the benefits of such journalism carries more positives than negatives, it doesn't mean that the negatives don't exist, and I think that the main negative is the desensitization of younger generations. Without a doubt, the beheading video of Daniel Pearl, while not the first video of its kind, is certainly the most culturally significant, as it essentially popularized the tactic of filmed executions, which other terror groups would go on to utilize, as would drug cartels, especially in Mexico. But that is the story of Daniel Pearl and his murder, arguably the first execution video to cross over into the public consciousness. But that is the video. I hope you enjoyed it, if you can enjoy this sort of content. I know this case isn't graphic in terms of modern standards, for lack of a better term, but ultimately, The case of Daniel Pearl is a significant one when it comes to gore media, and it was about time I covered it. But anyway guys, as always, thank you for the support, it's much appreciated. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, check out my other socials, my Twitter, my Twitch, etc. Links will be in the pinned comments. But as always, stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next one.